Hi everyone, and welcome to Broadway World TV. We're broadcasting here upstairs at Sardi's live today with Craig Zadan and Neil Meron from the Hairspray movie, and we're going to talk to them about their history and how they met, and then bring things up to date. Thank you guys for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here.
We love Broadway World.
Yeah, we love BroadwayWorld.com. We love it.
We're run this over and over again on loop. We love Broadway World.
We do.
It's the best site, and it's been so supportive and wonderful of our movie, so it's a pleasure.
And the movie's wonderful. So
Thank you.
If you haven't seen it yet when you're watching this, go see it, and then come back and watch the interview.
I grew up in Brooklyn.
Okay.
I was born in Florida, but I moved to Brooklyn when I was 2.
Okay.
So I don't even remember Florida, thankfully. Okay. But I grew up in Brooklyn, and then after that lived in Hempstead, Long Island, went to Hofstra University, and then moved into the city and lived in Manhattan for all of my childhood, and that's really where I started, is in New York.
Okay. What was the first Broadway show that you saw?
What's ironic about the question is that what I'm going to say to you is so weird because, of course, I didn't know Neil.
Right.
You know, we didn't know each other. And yet, we saw the same show.
Oh.
That's our first show. And that was How to Succeed on Broadway. And, you know, and I didn't know until a million years later when I met Neil, and Neil said his first show was How to Succeed. So I thought it was amazing and bizarre.
Yeah, it's cosmic.
Yeah.
And how about you?
I'm a Brooklyn boy through and through, grew up in Brooklyn, born in Brooklyn, and went to Brooklyn College. So I'm a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker who lives in LA, but still carries his New York roots proudly.
How much time do you guys still get to spend in New York these days?
Well, I keep a place here, so I
Yeah.
try to get here as often as I can, and I try to get here at least once a month to keep myself up to date on the energy and on the theater.
Yeah, I come back every couple of months and spend at least a week here because you have to come back and see the latest shows and go to our favorite restaurants. And I also do something which I do out of an addiction, and my addiction is that I love walking around the streets of New York. Okay. When I moved to LA, the horror of living in LA was that you're in the car all the time and there's no place to walk. Right. And every time I get to New York, I don't take cabs, I don't take the subway, I walk all over the city, and I can't get enough of it. I love the energy from the streets. Yeah. I just love it here.
See, I love it here too, except, you know, when we're here on the movie, they provide cars for you all the time, so it's really cushy. So I love walking, except.
So you're sneaking out of the car?
Oh yeah, it's really great. I went shopping on Sunday with the car. I've never done more shopping in my life, so it's good for the economy.
All the better. And what got each of you into the world of theater? Was it performing aspirations or creative or?
Well, I think being exposed to theater as a kid and seeing Broadway shows, you just or for me, I just fell under the spell of what the theater could be, what musicals can do to an audience, and that really grabbed hold of my life, and it's something that I always wanted to pursue. I actually never wanted a career in Hollywood, in television, and movies, and it's ironic that with the career that we've had, is that it is now so identified with theater. Right. So we've managed to be able to take that love for New York and for what we both experienced growing up and have it translated back in a filmic sense. So it's really, really wonderful.
Yeah. My beginnings in the entertainment industry really started with watching the Jerry Lewis Labor Day Telethon, because in those days they showed all of the stars who were on Broadway performing numbers from the shows. And when I would see those performances, I would then force my parents to buy tickets and take me into Manhattan and see all those Broadway shows that I saw on the telethon. Yeah. And as a result of that, I did something where I saved up my allowance and I saved up my birthday monies through several years. Right. And because you had to save for several years in order to buy a subscription to Weekly Variety, because it's so expensive. Yeah. Even now it's so expensive. And the thing was that my parents thought I was insane, because they said, you know, why don't you buy some clothes, or why don't you buy a new TV, or why, you know? And I said, no, I want Weekly Variety. And when I was reading it, I had no idea like what I would do, because I didn't want to be an actor at all. Right. And I didn't know really what a producer did. And so I just knew that I wanted to be part of it. And it wasn't until much later, actually, I was a journalist for several years, writing for New York Magazine and for a lot of other publications which led to me writing my book, Sondheim and Company. And the book was very, very important to me because it actually ended my journalism career. Because I had been very successful as a journalist over the years. And then when I wrote the book, when the book came out, I felt like I had then completed that part of my life.
Right.
And during the process of writing the book, people came to me and said, we're doing this tribute to Stephen Sondheim, and would you like to be one of the producers?
Yeah.
And I said yes, even though I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
And it was really that show. And it was a great moment in time because no one really knew Steve that well. Because he had just, it was 1973, and he had just done Company, Follies, and A Little Night Music.
Right.
And when A Little Night Music opened at the Shubert Theater, we did the tribute on the set of A Little Night Music in the theater. And I remember putting the whole thing together, and as a result of that excitement and on-the-job training, when it was over and it was successful and it was thrilling and it was wonderful, I thought to myself, this is what I want to do. Yeah. Now I know. I had no idea, but now I know. I want to produce.
So your first musical film was Footloose that you were involved with, correct?
Yes. The first film, well, I mean, what predates that is that Neil and I worked together at the Public Theater for Joe Papp at the New York Shakespeare Festival. And we had probably the best couple of years of our lives there because it was the heyday of the Shakespeare Festival. It was from 77 through 79. And the reason it was so great is because Chorus Line had just recently opened. So it was an organization that had no money and was struggling. But after Chorus Line, I think they were taking in like $40 million a year for the first, and all of a sudden they were flush and they had lots of money to do whatever they wanted to do. So Neil and I were like commissioning plays and musicals. I went to Chicago for Joe, and I found Landscape of the Body, the John Guare play, which we brought into the public. I found The Water Engine, the David Mamet play, which we brought into the public. We commissioned Gretchen Cryer to write a full version musical of I'm Getting My Act Together and Taking It on the Road. Nancy Ford. And it, you know, so it was like the most exciting, thrilling, joyous time you could ever imagine having, because our big daddy was really Joe Papp, and he really treated us like his sons. And he taught us everything. And I would say that if we were to talk about the influence that was the greatest on our lives, and if we were to talk about artistically who we are today as filmmakers, as artists, I would say we learned from Joe, because Joe talked to us all the time and taught us about playwriting and therefore screenwriting, and taught us about directors and talked to us about actors and multicultural casting, and all the things that we absorbed by working for Joe influenced the rest of our careers.
Do you guys miss working in the theater world? Or?
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's what I always wanted to do, and we're in the process now of optioning a piece of material to come back to New York and produce for Broadway. So it's not going to be this year, it probably won't be next year, but probably in 2009. We'll probably get going with it in 2008, once everything is all dotted and everything.
So there's nothing you can tell us about it yet?
There's nothing to tell you about it yet, other than it's a really exciting piece of material that I think would form the basis of a great Broadway musical, and we'll see how it all turns out.
But we thought we're kind of dumb that we started before anybody in the theater, and we had theater training, and we understood how shows are created and put together, and we went to Hollywood and brought theater to the movies and to television. But we thought, why have we not gone back to Broadway and actually brought that expertise back to the theater? And I mean, like the other day at the premiere of Hairspray in New York, Margot Lyons, you know, who is a great theater producer and produced one of the producers of Hairspray, said, you know, you guys are crazy. You know, we need you back here. We'd love for you to come back and do theater. So
you know, it's always been in our blood, and to not do it is kind of a loss in both of our lives. So the opportunity is becoming available to us, and we're going to do it.
I try to email it to you at least once a week.
Right, exactly. You do.
Go back to
you
Broadway.
do. You do.
So the first big musical TV collaboration together was Gypsy.
Right.
How did that come about?
I got
A phone call.
A phone call. It usually all starts with a phone call. But I did get a phone call from an agent by the name of Shirley Bernstein.
Okay.
And Shirley she's deceased now, Leonard Bernstein's sister.
Okay.
But she was an agent in her own right. She represented Stephen Schwartz, and she also at that point represented Arthur Lawrence. And she said, you know, would you guys like to do a TV version of Gypsy? Because all the authors would grant you the rights to do it. Are you interested? And of course I broke out into a cold sweat. I said, let me call you back.
Right.
So I went into Greg's office, I told him about the phone call, and of course we both were honored at this opportunity, and then I can turn it over to Greg for the next part of the story.
Luckily we had a friend whose name was Jeff Sagansky, and he was running CBS TV.
Okay. Good
And yeah, so we thought, you know, and he was, the guy was the head. I mean, he was running. And we called him up and we said, hey Jeff, you know, like, would you ever consider doing a musical on television? He said, no. We said, not any musical? I said, well, what do you have in mind? And he said, Gypsy. He said, oh, that's an awfully great piece. And he said, well, if we were to do that, who would you get? Because he said, I just want to warn you, it has to be somebody who's a big movie star who doesn't do TV, and it would be like the biggest event of the year. Otherwise, no, not even want to talk about it.
Right.
And we said, well, we have a friend who we think would be brilliant, and that's Bette Midler. And he said, okay, if you can get Bette Midler to commit to this, I will commit to you and we'll do it on TV. And we went, great. And here's an example of how friendships are really important in this business. If we had called her agent, they would have called her and said, hey, Bette, you want to do Gypsy on TV? And she would have said, nah. And that would have been the end of it. And the truth is, Neil and I knew her really well, and we called her many times at home. We had lunches, we had dinners, we had conversations. It went on for over a month. And at that time, she was a huge movie star. She had just done Down and Out of Beverly Hills and Outrageous Fortune and Big Business, and I mean, she just had one big hit. They were all those Disney films, you know. And so, you know, if you're an actress at that point that's having a run of big hit movies, you don't want to go back and do a TV thing. So we just had to explain to her, it's not a TV movie, it's Gypsy, and you have to do this. So we.
And she said yes. And you know, the truth of the matter is, if she hadn't said yes, we wouldn't have made Gypsy, which turned out to be an enormous rating success and a critical success, which led to Cinderella with Whitney Houston and Brandy. And that was the first time we worked with Rob Marshall as a choreographer on that piece. But we like to thank Bette, because if she had not said yes, it would not have kick-started this series of musicals, which led to Hairspray. So, and it would not have, we would not have been able to find Rob Marshall. So it all goes down ground zero in terms of this new revolution in movie musicals. Really starts with Bette Midler and her commitment to Gypsy.
She asked for a financial cut of all the others? Or
no, she should just take pleasure in what she started.
No, she's very proud of the fact that she began the whole thing.
We're incredibly grateful to her.
And that movie turned out so amazingly well.
Yeah, it really did, and the ratings were huge, and you know, she won a whole bunch of awards for it.
And that time, the idea of doing a movie musical on film for television was unheard of.
For 3 hours.
There were musicals done for TV, but they were all done on videotape, like Peter Pan and Rodgers and Hammerstein's Cinderella and various ones prior to that. But no musical had been done on film of a Broadway show. And it was a true innovation, and everybody said it's going to tank, it's not going to do well, and nobody really gave it the credit that it eventually got. And it just goes to show you that there is a hunger for musical film.
Also, we had a statistic back then, as I'm just recalling now, which I had forgotten about until this moment, which is that Gypsy became the first television movie musical in the history of the Academy to get nominated for Best Picture for an Emmy.
Wow.
So, which showed you that there were no movie musicals on TV. There was no opportunity for Emmys for them.
And I guess Annie must have been the second one.
Yeah, that's right.
Cinderella then.
Cinderella was nominated.
Was in a different category.
Yeah, they nominated in Best Television Special, which is beyond us.
Which
I don't
was
know.
odd.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but they
Right.
did. But then we went back to best movie with Annie. Yeah.
So how did Gypsy lead to Cinderella?
Well, it's a funny story because we got a call from Whitney Houston. Watch your shoulder.
Yeah.
We got a call from Whitney Houston's agent after Gypsy aired, and she said, you know, Whitney would love to do one of these. Do you have any ideas? And we put our heads together and we thought, what about doing a multicultural Cinderella, Rodgers and Hammerstein, starring Whitney Houston? And at the point that we got into it with Whitney, and right after Gypsy, we thought of Whitney as Cinderella. But it took several years before we were able to make it. And at that point, that's when we decided that Whitney would make a great fairy godmother, and Brandy was a new emerging.
What was most interesting, though, is that Whitney was calling us to tell us that she was backing out.
Right. Okay.
And we thought, what are we gonna do?
Right.
That's right.
And we threw at her, that's fine. What if you play the fairy godmother?
And you produce it with us.
You produce it with us, and Brandy plays Cinderella. And she said, oh, that's wonderful. I love that idea. So she actually was calling to say, I'm leaving the project, and instead
I forgot the drama.
No, I'm remembering these things now. I haven't remembered these things in a long time. But, yeah.
Taking you back down memory lane.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
then we went ahead and we put together this incredible all-star cast. And Bernadette Peters and Jason Alexander, and it was truly multicultural. Paolo Montalban, a Filipino, played the son of Whoopi Goldberg and our dear friend Victor Garber, both of our dear friends, Whoopi and Victor, who we subsequently worked with several times after that. And we hired Rob Iscove to direct, and we found this choreographer on Broadway by the name of Rob Marshall, and we hired him to do the choreography.
Oh, we should also tell the fact that there was a moment when Rob
no, that was Annie.
What? No,
that's
yeah,
funny.
no, Cinderella.
There were two ironies.
Yeah.
Okay.
There was a moment in time where we thought that we weren't able to make the deal for Rob Marshall to choreograph.
Okay.
So what are we going to do? What are we going to do? And we heard there was a choreographer by the name of Adam Shankman.
Okay.
And so
Never heard of him.
we set up a meeting between Adam and Rob Iscove, just in case Rob fell out, that Adam would be our backup.
Okay.
And funnily enough, after Cinderella became the success it became, Rob Iscove was offered feature films, and he made one feature film called She's All That with Freddie Prinze Jr., and it became kind of a very good teen success movie for Miramax, and he hired Adam Shankman to do the choreography. So it was just interesting how these paths kind of diverged and split apart and came together.
But we were watching Rob Marshall during the making of Cinderella, and also I will tell you that Whitney Houston came over to us one day, and she said, she pointed to Rob Marshall. She said, "You see that guy? Yeah. He's major. This guy's major. You keep your eye on this guy." We already knew that, but you know the fact that people were noticing because he was just the choreographer. But the next movie that we got offered from Disney was Annie, and we went to him and offered him to be the director of it, and Rob turned it down, and he said, "I'm not a movie director. Why are you asking me to do this movie?" And we said, "You are a movie director. We're telling you, you are absolutely a movie director."
He wanted a career in the theater.
Right.
Yeah. And we said, no, you've got to do this. You've got to do this.
But there's a more interesting irony in terms of Annie, is that at the time we were trying to cajole Rob into directing and choreographing Annie for us for TV, Nick Heitner was hired by Miramax to direct a movie called Chicago, based upon the Broadway musical. And Nick was interviewing Rob to be the choreographer of that movie. So there was a certain decision that had to be made, whether or not Rob would not direct and choreograph Annie for TV, or he would just be the choreographer for Nick Heitner's movie version of Chicago. And obviously he chose to do Annie, and the rest is, I guess, motion picture history with what happened. And Nick Heitner's version fell apart. Annie was a huge stepping stone for Rob.
He won the Emmy.
And he won the Emmy as Best Choreographer of the Year. And he was called in by Miramax for a meeting to direct the movie version of Rent. But Rob was not interested in doing Rent. He was very clever.
Yeah.
In the back of his mind, he thought he can get in the room with the Miramax people and say, I'm not interested in Rent, but what I really want to do is Chicago, and here's my idea how to do it.
And he talked with you beforehand about that idea?
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. We had
Yeah,
talked.
we
We
knew
had
what he
talked.
was gonna do.
Yeah, and it became like an amazing collaboration. I think one of the truly great collaborations of our lives, because we did 3 movies with him, you know, because we did Cinderella, then Annie, then Chicago, and we were sort of his team, and we launched him as a film director, and you know, there was a shorthand that we established with Rob.
Right.
And we were able to work in a way that we've never worked with anybody before. I mean, it was an amazing experience. And truly, a lot of people, you know, who were observers of what happened said they've never seen anybody become a full-blown movie director overnight.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you know, if you go back over the history of Broadway,
Right.
there are certain people that you could name, that we're not going to name today, but there's certain people that you can name who went on to try and be movie directors,
Right.
who did not succeed and were not good at it and had no instinct about cinema versus theater. They're brilliant theater directors, but not movie directors.
Right.
And then there were others, like the brilliant genius Bob Fosse, and others, who made that transition and seamlessly went from theater to film and back and forth and back and forth. Rob was one of those people, like Fosse,
Right.
where from the moment, you know, you always prepare yourself. You say, okay, Rob's never made a movie before, so we have to be on guard. So, you know, if he starts making any mistakes on Annie, we have to be there to like make sure that we correct it. Well, I got to tell you, he showed up on the set the first day of filming, and he knew exactly what he wanted. He knew what he was doing. He knew how to speak to the cameraman, to the actors. He knew exactly what he wanted with design, color. He just got it immediately. He was born overnight to be a film director.
Kathy Bates, who was somewhat skeptical about getting into the project with Rob, making his film debut, after about a week, she came up to us. She said, I've worked with Mike Nichols. I've worked with Rob Reiner. I've worked with all the best directors in the country and in the world, but Rob is the best director I've ever worked with.
Wow.
This is after a week.
Yeah.
So was it a tough sales pitch to sell him as?
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
It was. It
we
was.
had-
We threatened not to do it.
Yeah. We actually quit.
Did it?
What happened was, the irony of the whole thing was that we spent all that time fighting to try and get Rob to do Annie.
Right.
And then by the time he turned around and said, I'll do it, then we went back to Disney and we
Right.
said, we got Rob Marshall to do it. And they said, we don't want Rob Marshall. We
Yeah.
said, why? They said, because this is a very valuable piece. And to give this piece to somebody who's never directed a movie, are you crazy? And they said, we're not going to do it. So we quit. And they kept coming back to us and saying, you know, let's talk about other directors. And we said, why? We're not doing it. And they said, oh, you're going to do it. We said, no, we're not going to do it. We quit. Now, we knew because, I mean, honestly, what the good news was that, you know, Cinderella went on to become the highest rated movie on ABC in 14 years.
It was truly a phenomenon. I mean, the ratings were extraordinary.
60 million viewers. It was like Super Bowl ratings.
Not the musical. Again,
Yeah.
the power of a good
Yeah.
musical.
Right. Nobody wants to see musicals. And 60 million viewers.
And a multicultural Cinderella at that,
Right.
which actually was so significant insofar as that this allowed this particular piece to become everyone's, not just a white audience. It became everyone's piece because we found that there was a gap in terms of fairy tales and families, and to create this fairy tale that everyone could relate to was quite significant.
And also, I have to say, it comes from the background. I got credit where credit is due, Joe Papp. I mean, Joe Papp taught us about multicultural casting.
Right.
That's where we first learned about it. So when we tried it out and said we're going to do Cinderella, and we said to Disney, oh, by the way, we're going to cast, you know, a white stepmother and one black stepsister and one white stepsister, and the queen, who is Whoopi Goldberg, is black, and the
Right.
king is Victor Garber, who's white, and their son is Filipino.
Right.
They thought we were cracked.
Right.
And that carried
They-
on
you know.
to Annie as well, where we had white Victor Garber, Daddy Warbucks, and Miss Grace was black, divine, brilliant, gorgeous Audra McDonald. There was, after Annie aired, there was something that was so significant to us Time Magazine does a winners and losers column with every week, and winner of the week, Annie. White Daddy Warbucks becomes engaged to Black Miss Grace, and no one complains. That's what we wanted.
It must have been a great feeling.
It was fantastic. It was fantastic.
It was great. It was wonderful to be able to carry on the tradition that Joe Papp taught us about multicultural casting, and instead of people being afraid of it, they should embrace it.
Right.
You know?
Because nobody cares.
Right.
I mean,
No, it doesn't. No.
It's right casting. You cast what feels right.
Yeah.
So,
how hard was it to push that through, though, with Disney?
You know, it's always a little bit difficult to kind of affect change, but they eventually were very willing and embraced it at the end.
but you know, I mean, the thing was that to finish the story about Annie, so we quit, and we said, unless you hire Rob, we're not going to come back. And because of the success of Cinderella, we knew that they did not want to make Annie without us.
Right.
So we were in a position at that moment in time where we thought we're going to stick to our guns.
Right.
And eventually they came back, and they were angry, but they said, okay, damn it, you can hire Rob Marshall. But we always do that. I mean, you know, we always feel that another casting choice, there was a girl who had just won the Tony Award for Your Good Man, Charlie Brown, that we wanted, you know, for Annie, and Disney didn't want her. And it was Kristen Chenoweth.
Right.
And they said, no, she's not right, and we had other people in mind and all that. We just, you know, and they kept calling us with other choices. We got, no.
No, you know what, it was interesting because we chose on Annie to do theater stars. It was Victor Garber, Kathy Bates is a big theater star, Alan Cumming, Kristen Chenoweth, Audra McDonald. Broadway's best. There was nobody for ABC or Disney that said ratings. But we said the ratings is Disney, Annie, and that's how you sell it.
40 million people.
Pardon?
40 million people.
40 million people, exactly.
Yeah.
And tons of Emmy nominations. And Rob winning.
So you have to spend a lot of time being proved right.
Yeah, oh yeah, but you're always
That's
doing
all right.
that. That
You
never
know,
changes.
That's the job of the producer, you know. I mean, if we're hired, it's about the choices that we make, that we bring to the table, that we have to affect. And that's what makes us producers.